Everyone, today's grants and funding committee members and Metro Art staff are joining by conference call. In a moment, we will call roll of all the members present. And this meeting will be recorded and posted within 2 business days to the Metro Nashville YouTube channel. All votes will be made by roll call. When speaking, please identify yourself by name. All action items voted on at today's meeting will be reconfirmed at the next in-person meeting of the committee. I encourage all participants on this call to stay muted unless speaking. If any commissioners are having technical difficulties, please let me know. And of course, Grace will fix everything. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. So we're going to take a roll call, and I will do that. And you know what to do after that. Okay, Mary Ann Bird.
Mary Ann Bird, present.
Jackie Daniel.
Jackie Daniel, present.
Bonnie Dow. Bonnie Dow. Commissioner Dow, are you there?
Yep, sorry, Bonnie, present.
Gotcha. Commissioner Haynes. Commissioner Haynes. I see you. Okay, I'll come back to that. Commissioner Powell.
Present.
Commissioner Ramos.
Present.
Sorry, Ramos. Sorry, Mary Elena.
It's okay.
Is Commissioner Schmidt here?
I am. Commissioner Schmidt is present.
Okay. And Commissioner Haynes?
Clay Haynes is present.
Good. All right. Okay, then we are officially calling the meeting to order. So right now I'm going to call for the motion that this meeting agenda constitutes essential business of this body, and meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans considering the COVID-19 outbreak, and is permitted under the governor's executive order number 65. So we just need someone to propose the motion, and so we can continue with the meeting.
Mary
So
Ann
moved.
Bird, so move.
Mary Ann, and do I have a second?
Second, this is Mattia Powell.
Thank you, Mattia. There are no does anyone have a comment on this motion? You can raise your hand. I think I'll see it, or if you want to just verbally. Any comments? Okay, let's all vote to adopt our telephonic meeting. So let's take a roll call again. Let's take a vote on this motion. Commissioner Bird?
Mary Ann Bird, yes.
Commissioner Daniel?
Jackie Daniel, yes.
Commissioner Dow?
Bonnie Dow, yes.
Commissioner Haynes?
Clay Haynes, yes.
Commissioner Powell?
Mattia Powell, yes.
And Commissioner Ramos?
Elena Ramos, yes.
And Commissioner Schmidt?
Sherry, I'm actually just here in an ex officio capacity, so I don't have to vote on the motions. I'm just listening in.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so now I think I want to welcome the new members of the Grants and Funding Committee. That's Mary Ann Bird, welcome. Clay Haynes and Mary Elena Ramos, welcome, commissioners. And this is my first time chairing this committee, so please be patient. Mattia, I feel like I have big shoes to fill when you were chairing this committee, so I hope I'm doing okay today. So the first action item, we're going to turn it over to Janine. Janine, it's your go.
Actually, first we'll do the CARES funding, so I'll pass that to Caroline. But I do want to also welcome the new members and just say how pleased I am that you all agreed to be part of this committee. You all bring such unique strengths, and I can't wait to dive in and discuss these, these really important issues and create some policy changes that positively impact our arts community. So I'll say that for now, and actually it will pass back to you and Caroline.
Okay, so Caroline, you've got a PowerPoint presentation. I can't wait to, we all can't wait to see that. Thank you, Caroline. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'm Caroline Vincent of Metro Arts. I will go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about CARES funding, and this is actually the federal funding that came to the city. And you can go to the next slide. Last week, Metro Council by resolution approved $2 million for arts and cultural nonprofits, up to $100,000 each, which is very exciting. Yay. Please thank your council members. And the COVID-19 committee that worked on that, really appreciative of their support. So in the resolution, it says Metro Arts Commission should determine which nonprofit organizations would receive these funds. Pathway Lending is actually an economic development lender and community development financial institution that we have partnered with, and they have done this with a couple of the other COVID CARES funds to actually distribute the funding. Because of our timeline, all of this money has to get out the door by the end of December. And as you're all familiar, our grants process can take a lot longer than that if we have to do grant contracts for every single one of these awards. So we realized in just timelining that is just impossible for us to do that. So we are partnering with Pathway, which means they will receive a 5% administrative fee. And this, again, is in line with other agreements they have with Metro to do very similar things. So we can go to the next slide. So this is directly from the resolution. The council is directing the Arts Commission to determine which nonprofits would receive these funds. We did copy in our eligibility language from our current grant guidelines. So this makes it pretty simple that these were the organizations that would receive these funds. The only thing different really is the IRS determination letter date is a little bit different. We usually require 3 years in business to receive our Metro Arts grants, but the committee asked that this date be February 29th, 2020, so 12 months prior to that. So we may see a few other organizations come into the pool that we have not previously funded, which is great. So I think you're all familiar with these eligibility requirements. Nothing too surprising there. We can move on to the next slide. And the same for ineligible arts organizations that focus on technical assistance or advocacy, friends of organizations, or funds for capital improvements or things like that would not be approved. We may, as the commission, establish additional criteria, and we created sort of a chart of allocations that is in the next slide and is part of the resolution. So we can go to that next slide. So in the categories that we use at Metro Arts, many of you are familiar with our categories, which are based on budget size. So what we call those are basic operating 1, 2, and 3, and then core support. So basically we took this $2 million and broke it up into those categories to make sure we could cover, all the organizations we anticipate will be applying for these funds. So as you can see in that second column, this is the number of currently funded arts organizations we have in each category. And if you go over one column to the anticipated number of organizations, we left a little bit of wiggle room because we do feel like we'll have additional organizations that we aren't currently funding. And so that creates the max request over in that fourth column, or fifth column, I guess it is, a little bit less than that 100,000, but we still feel like that's a substantial amount of money. So this is sort of our max amounts, and then you'll see the Pathway Lending admin fee at the bottom, which equals $2 million. I don't anticipate we'll have any money left, but if there is money left over, it just reverts back into the Metro Fund. So we can go to the next slide. So next steps would be, we would need this committee and then the commission to approve these criteria. And if you wanted to add any additional criteria, we can, although I feel like it's pretty set. I mean, we're in good shape with the criteria that we have there now. If the commission, you guys approve, and the full commission approves next Thursday, we hope that Pathway Lending can launch the application hopefully by the 20th, which is the very next day. So this application opens up. It'll be sort of on a rolling basis until the funding is disseminated. We do read the resolution as stating that Metro Arts Commission needs to approve allocations as well. So what we would probably do is process all of those applications, and then sometime in that first couple weeks of December, have another specially called meeting of the commission to approve allocations. But we hope to do that, fairly quickly. So the funding basically can be reimbursement for expenses of any 2 months since March that has not already been covered by another federal source, like the PPP funding or other federal grants. So not only do we have to follow what's in the resolution, we also have to follow the guidance from the federal government on what CARES funding can be actually spent on. So I think that's all of the pieces, and I will turn it back over to Sherry.
Thank you, Caroline. Do we have any questions from any commissioners? Anything you want to discuss about the CARES Act, the criteria? Okay. I think there's no, Clay, Commissioner Haynes, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair Busey. Caroline, can you walk us through the formula that you outlined in that spreadsheet in terms of overall allocation, and how does that mirror our typical grant funding? Are there any differences and changes in terms of the kind of tier 1, 2, and 3 category? And then, yeah, perfect. That slide specifically, does that? It appears that basically mirrors in terms of percentages, but I'm just kind of going offhand. Talk a little bit more about that and how you came up with that.
So I think if I'm understanding your question, so if you look at basic operating 1, we're currently funding 7 organizations in that category. There was one organization in that category we did not fund this year, but we assume they would apply for these funds. So we kind of looked at that, in that third category or third column, you'll see we left some wiggle room there. So in case we do have additional organizations, same, on down the line. So operating support, we're funding currently 7 organizations. I didn't really anticipate additional organizations in that category, just based on the 1 million to 5 million. We were not aware of any others. Basic operating 3, we currently fund 20. We added a few there for that wiggle room. And then same for core with 18 currently funded. We left a little more space for that because there may be organizations out there that we're not aware of and or we're just currently not funding, but they have been, operating for a year or a little longer. So that's kind of how we came up with this, and just took that 26 times 15,000 equals 390. 23 times 20,000, kind of went across the board like that. And we just kind of worked with those numbers until we had spread the funding out as much as possible. And we did want to make sure, and the committee talked a lot about this, just making sure those smaller organizations are funded with a priority. So we did leave a little more space there.
That's very helpful. Thank you for outlining that. And I probably didn't do a good enough job of asking the question. So this is really based upon the anticipated number of organizations and then that max request. And so I guess my question is, it looks like 700,000, roughly 35% of the overall budget. Is that about what we've been doing year over year for basic operating 1, about 35% of available funds? Is that increased or is that decreased? And then same question for each of the different categories, right? Because all of it's just math, and really what we have to do as a commission and as staff is really say how are we going to allocate this? And one way to do it is based upon number of organizations that we anticipate that will apply, but there's some argument for the max request for one of these organizations should be higher or lower. And I'm just trying to understand kind of the basic, kind of framework for how that was, how those decisions were made.
Sure, I think it is similar. So we're usually about 30%, 30%. I feel like the categories we currently have, it's 30, 30, 30, and then we have about 10% in, project grants. in our categories that we, talk about basic 1, 2, and 3. We didn't really look at it that way. We were thinking more about what is the max request. I mean, what could you, if you're a small organization, your, monthly expenses times 2 is really the maximum amount you can receive based on the guidance from the CARES and other, conversations at the council level. So that was more what we were thinking about was, expenses per month times 2 versus sort of in our other grant process, we're thinking more about, those percentages that you're talking about. So it was a little bit of a different math problem, but I see what you're saying. And I think certainly that's up for discussion as far as, allocations go. And we were advised from finance and others that, these are pretty large amounts compared to other CARES funding that's gone out the door for small businesses. So they felt like this was in the, range of what could be expected and, for the music venues and some other small business grants that are out there.
That answers my question. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haynes. Anybody else have any discussion or questions regarding the criteria for the CARES Act funding? Okay. All right. I need a motion to approve the criteria.
Sherry, I think Marianne had a question.
Oh, forgive me. Marianne, go ahead. Forgive me.
Thank you. I appreciate that for the catch. My question is given that this is COVID relief monies, is there some portion of the decision-making processes that is based on most severe need or the most severe impact due to the corona shutdowns? I mean, if we have to pick and choose about who's going to get funded and by how much, and we had to prioritize, would we take into account, for example, something that can't be done virtually? Will we be taking into account the need or the desperation with which they are suffering as part of the decision-making process?
Sure. I think that's definitely could be part of the decision-making process. I don't think the current resolution reads that way. So if the commission wants to add that criteria in some language, we could certainly do that now. I think what we've been talking about with Pathway as far as the application goes is, we'd need to validate current operations and make sure people are still, operating, that they haven't completely shut down. There's still some sort of programming or something is happening. They still have some staff or, some type of payroll. So I think it's implied, but I wouldn't say it's overt in the current guidelines that we have. And I'm not sure, I can check with Pathway to see if there's any federal guidance there, if we can, or if it just has to be a straight reimbursement.
So is this specifically payroll money, or is this, it says support, so have limited to payroll, or is it for other things as well, like rent and utilities and materials or whatever?
Yes, it's not limited just to payroll. It's rent, mortgage, any of that, any operating expenses.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. I guess I need to ask this question. Caroline, do you feel like we need to address that even though it is implied? I mean, should we consider maybe just putting that into the wording of the criteria based on COVID needs or something to that effect? I think if it's implied, that's good enough for me, but do any of the commissioners feel like it's something that we need to change now and put into writing? Is that a question I can ask as the chair?
Hi, this is Mattia. I mean, I think that it's kind of implied on need, but also I think that we're in a place where, we're in a really uncertain time. So, you know, this is something that's supposed to support organizations at this point from what from some of the challenges they've had this year, but they will continue to probably have challenges just because we're still having, you know, we're still experiencing COVID and we're not exactly sure where this is going to go. So I would just say that I think there's going to be need, you know, all around, and, you know, I wouldn't want to, you know, put too many stipulations on that just because, you know, this is a long term. We've been experiencing this now all year. We know that this is probably going to be, you know, we're probably going to see more of this is ramping back up. And so like people will continue to have challenges. So, you know, I think that that most organizations are going to need support. So I don't know that we need to stress it, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Yeah, I think that it is implied, and to use Caroline's term, if it's implied, that gives us wiggle room and we can address the needs as they present themselves. So I guess I don't need to give my opinion anymore on that, but I want to, I think it's time to put forward the motion unless there are any other questions or discussions. Anybody's hand up? I don't see anyone.
This is Clay Haynes. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
This is Mary Ellen, I second.
Thank you. That was Mary Elena. I'm sorry.
Yes, Mary Elena.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then I think we can move on. We have to do the roll call. I know it, I've got it. I'm just a little confused for my first meeting, but I think I got it now. All right, we'll take a roll call and see if we want to approve the criteria for the CARES Act funding. So Commissioner Byrd.
Commissioner Byrd, approve.
Commissioner Daniel.
Jackie Daniel, approve.
Commissioner Dow. Commissioner Dow. I'll come back to you, Bonnie. Commissioner Haynes.
Approve.
Commissioner Powell.
Approved.
Commissioner Ramos.
Approve.
And Commissioner Dow. Commissioner Dow, are you still there? Grace, did you hear that?
I couldn't hear her. I do see her mic going on and off, so she might be having some audio trouble.
Commissioner Dow, I see that you are unmuted.
Oh.
I just cannot hear you.
I would say we can see you, Commissioner Dow, but we cannot see you. Or wait, we can see you, but we cannot hear you. I think in this case, a visual thumbs up is acceptable.
We got it. Okay, good. I like that. We are all dealing with problems, technical problems during this age of virtual meetings. I'm surprised I'm even here today and got on my computer properly, but I'm so glad I did. All right, we can move on. So that has passed, and now we're going to action item number 2. And Grace, do you want to take over from here?
Yes, I believe Janine is going to start us off.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry and Grace. And yeah, I'll just provide the kind of the overview of our conversation and the presentation today. So Marissa and I will give you all an overview of each section of the grants guidelines. I'll be handling sections 1 and 2, pass it back to Marissa, do section 3. We're going to split up section 4, and then I'll close out with section 5. And we will pause. There's going to be highlighted sections, so we'll pause to flag those and give those a little additional attention. And at the end of each section, we will invite your comment and questions, and then staff will note those comments and also any revised suggestions. And it would be, we'd love, your insight. So if you could think about providing one comment at the end of each section, that would be helpful to make sure that we have all of your kind of input and voices in each of the sections. At the end of the total 5 sections of the grants guideline, that is when I'll hand it back to Sherry, and she's going to be leading the discussion about the proposed revisions and any major shifts we'll be taking. Marissa at that time will also be reviewing, just the notes that we've been taking throughout the different 5 sections. So just to note, we will be giving you a break. It's a long meeting. Thank you so much again. Right after section 3, we'll have a 5-minute break. Again, we've highlighted some sections that we really want to focus on. CARE, the Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity, has also provided comments, and we've woven them through each of the sections. And as a special guest, we do have Ellen Gilbert, who is a member of the Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity here, and she will provide any context, answer questions regarding CARE's specific recommendations. So there it is. Can I have the next slide, please? So we will be going over, these are our major topics of strategic discussion today. Again, like I said, going over those recommendations from the Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity. We are going to be touching on equity criteria that was previously approved for the Thrive guidelines, and considering if that will be incorporated into our grants guidelines. We will be discussing whether or not to continue with the dollar-for-dollar matching requirement. We'll be considering for this year and, going forward, but definitely for this, focus on this year, whether or not we will be providing just operating support or revising categories to kind of adjust and to meet the needs of COVID-related challenges for this year. We'll also be discussing, this is a procedural change involving finance, whether or not to decouple core and other projects from the larger contracting kind of procedures, and whether those can be streamlined into our procurement procedure. So we'll go into that because that's a technical kind of behind the scenes thing, but that does impact our applicants and grantees. Next slide. As I said, we have Ellen here from CARE and the Committee for Anti-Racism and Equity. So basically, they took the draft revisions last year's, the draft guidelines, which are basically last year's approved guidelines, and made suggestions. And they made suggestions about giving matters, all of the scoring criteria, also the ranking allocations timeline. Next slide. We're also going to be going over some administrative changes. These don't require too many. I don't anticipate large conversations about these, but we will be going over some administrative changes that we are making to hopefully kind of streamline processes and make it an easier experience for applicants and grantees. So we'll be talking about the basic re-verification process that we did get additional information from our grantees about, the Giving Matters profile. We are making a shift to Submittable, a new online platform. Of course, there are going to be dates that are going to be changed, and we're making changes to kind of the administrative flow, who the contact person is, et cetera. So you'll go over that, but these don't necessarily require a lot of our group discussion. Next slide, please. So now we're just going to jump into section 1. So intro, eligibility, expenses, grant cycle timeframe, matching funds. So, all right, next slide, please. So this, you have these, I won't go over everything, but this is our current non-discrimination policy and ADA compliance and accessibility language. I don't have too much to comment on this. I haven't heard any suggestions or revisions requested from the public, but if you do have comments, you can of course bring those up during that section. All right, next. Okay, interpretation service, next slide. Here I will note, so these are our listed kind of the larger community outcomes that we seek to achieve. These were created during the 2015 strategic plan. So those include stronger creative workforce, a vibrant creative neighborhood, and creating deeper cultural participation. So just wanted to note if there are any other outcomes or modifications that we should consider in light of COVID-19, again, we'll bring those up here. I think they're pretty broad and there's still obviously important things to discuss, but we do have to take everything in light of the challenges of COVID-19 this year. So wanted to flag that. All right, next slide, please. Great. So here is our eligibility. So there is a CARE recommendation here regarding the Giving Matters profile and kind of the complications that they do present for kind of emerging or newer organizations. So I'll let, during our discussion period, Ellen will be, Ellen is available to comment on that. But, basically just wanted, they're suggesting some simplifications and also some staff support. Also, there's a recommendation for just in regards to guidelines, kind of separating the various guidelines out so that they're kind of not one massive document, but maybe smaller documents. So that's something to consider on an administrative level, but definitely makes sense in regards to assisting kind of under-resourced or newer organizations. Also, basic we'll bring this up later as well, but the basic category is adjudicated on a 3-year cycle. And so if you are an organization that meets basic criteria on a non-adjudication year, you apply for core funding. So that's just something to think about. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so to continue on with eligibility, we went over this just, in regards to CARE, not too much has changed, so I won't really comment too much on those organizations that really have historically been not eligible. All right, next slide. These are the eligible and not eligible expenses. Again, nothing here really to discuss too much, but again, if you have other comments, we'll be happy to take those later. All right, next slide, please. All right, matching funds, this is something to consider. So we currently require a one-to-one matching grant, or matching, we currently require one-to-one matching funds. So if the grant is, $10,000, then we require the organization to show proof that they will also provide a matching $10,000. This is something to consider in light of the challenges that people have. There is a move in some local arts agencies in different places to remove the matching funds, which will make it easier for struggling organizations or organizations struggling right now with COVID challenges, or just smaller organizations, under-resourced organizations, to accept grants. So that's definitely something to consider and talk about. All right, next slide. Okay, so here we are at the Section 1 review. At this point, we'll take comments or questions, note any major themes for discussion. Marissa will be noting those revisions and all of that. And then again, we'll review and have a big discussion later. But if we could just create the list, the discussion list at this point, and I'll hand it back to Sherry to facilitate, but I will be here to answer questions, as are my colleagues and Ellen Gilbert from CARE.
Okay, thank you, Janine. I'll go ahead and reiterate once what you just said. Are there any questions? Go ahead and raise your hand or just speak up and I'll call on you.
This is Mattia. Hey, Janine, I have a question about the matching funds. I saw it on the slide, but I would like to go back to see what specific funds are eligible to be matched for grantees.
Sure. Yeah, we can go back to that slide. And so currently, all of our grants require a matching fund except for Catalyst, which we unfortunately had to not fund last year. We've moved Catalyst funds last year back to operating funds. But for the most part, all of our grants require matching. There's a matching requirement for all of our grants.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Any other comments or questions? Clarifications? I have a question. That all these organizations must be chartered by, was it chartered by the state or by the city? And what qualifies somebody as being chartered? That they have a license to operate, or do they have to apply for a certain, is there a certain charter application that they have to go through Metro government to apply for?
So this has to do with their kind of their IRS filings or their nonprofit filings with the state and the federal. So we're basically saying, because we're, local arts agency focused in Nashville, Davidson County, they are to be chartered in Tennessee. So how this plays out is that, we're looking for like resident organizations, arts nonprofits that are centered in Tennessee. So we've had some issues where maybe a larger, like a national organization has, is chartered, for example, in California, but they might have a satellite location here. Unfortunately, that satellite location is not eligible to apply for a grant directly from us because they're not chartered here. However, they're able to partner with a locally chartered organization and produce programming that, apply for programming in that way. And we do have a couple examples of that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Janine.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for Janine or for other staff members? Any discussion?
Yes, this is Clay Haynes. Can you outline what the goal of the matching funds requirement is? I think that I understand what that is, but I think that it would be helpful. I also think that there are probably some pretty significant impacts of that. And so can you talk about that a little bit, Janine?
Sure thing. So basically the idea of requiring matching grants is to show, a little bit of one, like just buy-in, right? So they have, kind of skin in the game, that their support, we're partnering with them. We're providing grants, they're providing grants. It also shows, some sort of financial resources behind that. That's the idea. So, it's a rationale. Many foundations and local, granting organizations use this dollar for dollar match. It's not unusual at all. However, in regard, there is there's conversation, there's a shift, in light of reaching organizations that have historically been under-resourced or communities that, that have been under-resourced, to remove the matching requirement, which will make it easier for them to accept the money and just produce the programming. So that's the issue to discuss, whether or not the commission feels strongly about making sure that there is a, like a financial commitment from these organizations we'll be granting funds to, or if we feel that, to allow for ease of, greater accessibility and ease of producing programming, to remove the matching requirements. It also, removing the matching requirements also does streamline, the reporting slightly. So there's an administrative, I guess would be benefit for the organization, since they would only need, at the end of the grant, they would only need to show the funds that that were the grant funds that were spent and not their matching funds. So there's a little bit of that administrative impact as well.
This may not be the time for discussion, but I guess I will go on the record and say that I do think that is particularly restrictive to new organizations. And I think that it does kind of lock us into kind of the entire grant community into a cycle of continuing to fund the same organization. And, you know, I think this is probably philosophical for our committee to discuss, but I think the greatest role that we can play as a commission is to figure out how we can broaden the community, not restrict it. And this feels like, and I'm just giving a gut level reaction of a restriction, not a broadening. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that comment. And that is exactly, I think you have the issue at hand summarized pretty well.
Are there any other discussions or questions?
Yes, this is Mary Elena. I'm kind of on the same line of Clay. I was, and I'm sorry if this is like not a smart question to ask, but looking forward to, I know that right now we're looking at, you know, the situation with COVID, and I completely understand removing the matching funds if that's something that we want to consider. But looking at the future, and based on what Clay was saying, you know, our intention is to make art, you know, more accessible, not restrictive. Is this something that we could look at adding the matching funds part to certain categories and not all of them? You know, like, you know, if the organizations are basic 1 or basic 2, then maybe add that matching funds to it, but the other organizations that fall under lesser categories because they don't have, you know, the operating budget, then maybe, you know, is that something that can be considered or?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's all part of, you know, that's a great suggestion and something to consider as the committee.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Busey, and I have to agree that I think it's something we should consider with these matching funds. It does seem a bit restrictive, and it would be nice to have some flexibility for these arts organizations that can't always match $5,000 for $5,000. It's difficult, and so as we move forward with this, and we have our big commission meeting next week. Is there a rewording that we could do in this part of the eligibility to sort of make everyone happy? Is that something that we would talk about now, Janine, or should we address that in the commission meeting on Thursday?
So I think that we'll let's hold the discussion, the kind of further discussion until the end of section 5 of just this meeting. And then at that point, you can decide if you feel confidently you want to move in one direction, or if you'd like to invite the rest of the full commission in part of this discussion. So that's all up to you all.
That sounds good. We'll table it until the end of these sections, and we'll decide then. So I guess we are moving on to section 2, correct, Janine?
That is correct. So let's move on to section 2. And so this is grant categories. Also, we're going to have a pretty big discussion about this. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Great. So this is an overview of our operating grants. I won't go over, the details, but operating support, as you might know, supports kind of the general operating funds, overhead, keeping the lights on, all of that. Next slide. And this goes over the maximum requests. So at this point, we do have a 20% of the organization's average operating revenue, not to exceed $300,000 for basic and $20,000 for core. That's where we're at right now. You have to have, this is part of eligibility, 2 years of financial history at the time of application, at least, and then it's different for basic. 3 years is required for basic, and then again, we're talking about just like the so not included in the calculation are donations or in-kind contributions, capital projects. All right, next slide, please. This is what it does not support. And we kind of talked about this, just different organizations that we don't provide operating support to. However, those organizations, so for example, NPT, not available, our operating grants don't support, Belmont, NPT, those local organizations that fall under these organization types. However, they are allowed to apply for project grants. So that's how we connect with non-arts organizations that use the arts to provide, to provide programming to the community. All right, next slide, please. So here again are the kind of the nitty gritty with basic operating support. So just to flag, so FY21 applicants, this are not adjudicated again until FY24. And so applicants reviewed in FY21 will retain their scores and rankings received until the next adjudication cycle. There was, some initial discussion and requests from some basic organizations to maybe could do the full adjudication this year, not just re-verification, which would retain their scores, but a full adjudication, which would create a new score and new rankings. You all received the full a survey of grantees with with their preferences, and there was a pretty large preference to just do re-verification and not the full adjudication again. I don't know the specifics of the reasons why for each, but that was the preference, to just to keep the score, keep the ranking, and do re-verification. I imagine that it's because of ease of process and not to go into a full re-adjudication cycle again, which is much more involved in regards to staffing, grant writing, et cetera, time as well with going to a full panel, et cetera. So that's my assumption, but that was, but the preference was to just do re-verification. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is the overview of CORE. Again, these are all organizations with $100,000 budget or less. All right, next slide. These are our current project. I'm going to go over our current project categories. So I'll pause here briefly to just give you context of what the big question is for this section that we're asking of the committee today, and that is whether or not to recommend either in light of COVID and in light of challenges of organization survival in this year, to move all funds into operating, or to maybe continue on and have operating and project support. If we do suggest continuing with project support, do we continue with these project categories, or do we shift and have different project categories more in line, in line with issues that organizations are dealing with specifically in this funding cycle. So that's pretty big things to decide. There is a move. So for example, GIA grants makers in the arts, AFTA. In there are suggestions that moving to operating is beneficial this year for, again, organization survival, and there are some local examples of foundations that have done this. For example, the Healing Trust has moved all of their dollars this year to just operating funds. So with that, that's just something to think about as we move through project support. But project support still up to you all, and the categories, those are up for discussion. All right, next slide, please. So these are our current projects. Oh yeah, so these are the restrictions. Basically, there's no double dipping. That's basically what this slide says, of just, you can only, if you're already getting funding, a Metro funding from, for example, parks, for the same program, you can't get funding from us. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so currently we have, oh yeah, so these are a little bit of the restrictions that we had talked about last year, just to remind you all of remind the committee members we did have last year and to introduce this to our new committee members. So after 3 years, because we do want projects to be kind of like fresh new projects or expansions, you know, of operating, not just operating funds. After 3 years of project support, applicants may be asked to provide additional information that supports why the organization should have ongoing funding, basically. And so, and then there's also the restrictions of what you can apply for. So you can apply, if you are an arts organization, you can apply for an operating fund and 2 more project support grants. So either arts access or youth, and creation or catalyst. So that's that. And then non-arts organizations can apply for either arts access or youth, or and not creation or catalyst. So those are the 2. Arts access and youth are currently the categories that we allow kind of these non-arts organizations that do use arts as a vehicle to apply for. All right, next slide, please. All right, so here's access. Access, you know, to give you an overview, specifically funds organizations that are doing projects that support communities that have not been typically funded in the arts. And then there's a list of the specific organizations that we use. And this, yeah, so you can see them here. And then, okay, let's see. And there's another description of just, you know, kind of the types of things, events, performances, exhibits, etc. And then, you know, the projects must be led by an artist. And that's pretty typical of all of our project grants. And then requests currently cannot exceed $7,000 and currently matching, you know, requires a matching fund. All right, next slide, please. All right, and this is the description of the different communities that we are considered kind of historically underfunded in the arts. We did take this from language from Vanderbilt. And then, so yeah, and yeah, next slide, please. So this, now we have youth arts. So this is anything that is out of school hours. So this is like after school programs or weekend, but not, we do not fund in school programs for youth up to 18. However, they can be in kind of like alternative situations, alternative, you know, programs or it doesn't necessarily need to be like tied to a school or anything. So these are considered like youth experiencing homelessness or court involved, et cetera, can apply for this for youth arts support. All right, next slide, please. So Catalyst. Catalyst is basically our capacity building grant. And we, you know, as I mentioned last year, in light of kind of the shutdowns related to the pandemic, we did not fund Catalyst, and we moved things to back to the funds back to our operating support budget. And I'll move on to creation. And creation supports basically new works. So, and those are all listed there about different types of things. And, you know, we have funded very exciting programs through the Creation Project grant. All right, next slide. All right, so here we are back at the section review. So I will hand it back to Sherry, but I'm here for questions. Sherry, can you unmute yourself, please?
Just talking away. Yeah, thanks, Janine. So I guess we're going to open it up to discussion. So go ahead and raise your hand or speak up, and we'll start a discussion on this.
Questions, Mary Ann Bird. For one of the new members of the committee, will you please explain to me what the catalyst means? in terms of the Arts Commission?
Sure. So the Catalyst grant is a capacity building grant. So something like, something like a project that will, and can we go back to it, Grace? That shifts the organization in some way and allows them for greater capacity. So some maybe like, strategic planning or financial sustainability plan. So they're listed here. We had the Grants and Funding Committee came up with some really great specific examples of what those projects could be. They weren't limited to this, but they could be. They could include expanding on cultural equity, financial sustainability, succession planning, workforce development, emergency preparedness, board development, strategic planning. That was some examples because people did want to know, like, well, what can we use this for? Like, what exactly, how would we, but it's, so the term catalyst, just to spark something and to like let them grow in a really deep foundational way. And no matching funds are required. Yeah. For that one last year. But again, unfortunately, we didn't fund it last year.
All right. Thank you. That's very helpful to me. Thank you.
Any other discussions or questions?
This is Mattia. Just for just as we get ready for discussion, I do think as far as how to reallocate our funding, whether or not we do project support or we do cooperating, a couple of things, concerns, just thoughts I want to bring to the forefront to note for our discussion later. One is like, there are organizations that can't get operating support right now because they don't qualify, and how are they impacted by the project support? And also, some of the project support particularly might go to specific programming that's happening in the after school space, that people might be dependent on that to continue on to offer this to students. So if there's Janine, is there a possibility? I know we don't want to like rehash every grant that we've given out in these categories in the last few years, but it would be great to kind of have a better understanding of like where we just approved some of this, and I know it should be fresh in my head, but it's not. But just like some of the grants we've given out in those categories, so that we can have a better discussion around whether or not we should, reallocate everything to operating.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I can, so just to give you some examples of, for example, the Access grant. And these are tough to say. I mean, these are tough, big, tough decisions. So last year we were able to give Friends Life, and so they are a non-arts organization. So Friends Life focuses on working with adults with different abilities. And they were able to, we gave them, they were ranked very highly. They were able to do programming, their arts program virtually online. So they shifted, to the virtual, in regards to like social distancing and everything really beautifully. So that's one example of an organization that we have funded that isn't an arts organization. Also, who else? Let's see, in regards to youth, there's East Nashville Hope Exchange, and they have gotten, it's like a literacy, arts and literacy program. They've been consistently funded with our project support grants. Also, they weren't funded and Oasis was also funded. So for youth arts last year, I have just a list here. It's Oasis Center, East Nashville, Hope Exchange, Rocket Town. And those are all non-arts organizations, but that have gotten youth arts, do art and were able to get funds. Previously, not last year, but previously we've funded the Native American Indian Association of Tennessee for their powwow. They didn't receive funding last year, but that's an organization that has previously received funding. They were able to get Thrive funding this year.
Thank you. I just wanted to flag that as we get ready for our discussion, that I know that there were nonprofits that offer arts programming that wouldn't really be an arts organization and couldn't really apply for any of the operating grants. It's still a conversation we need to have. I just wanted to, have a little more clarity around that when we have the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Are there any other discussions or questions for Janine?
This is Mary Elena. I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but the only thing that I would be concerned about that is a lot of these categories, the project categories, this serve a lot of people of color in all of these projects. So I would be extremely concerned if we, but mostly, Mattia just mentioned a lot of these organizations will not qualify for operating funds. So that means that there's a lot of underserved population or people of color that will stop receiving, access to the arts. So that's just something that I wanted to put out there. And Janine, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong, but I'm really concerned about that. But that's all.
No, thank you so much for that. And that is definitely, staff also believes that should be part of the discussion.
Okay. Any more comments, questions? Can we take a little break? How long do we normally take for a break? Is it like a 10-minute break?
I think we're just going to stick with 5 minutes this time around, if that's okay with you guys. Obviously, we need a bit more time. That is great. But if it would be possible to come back at 2:11, we got this meeting packed full for y'all.
Yeah, this is a big meeting. 2:11 sounds great, Grace. Thank you for that. And commissioners, we'll see you back then. Thank you.
Wonderful. Do y'all need a couple more minutes, or can we go ahead and get started with section 3?
I think we're ready to go with section 3.
Fabulous. We're going to be switching it up a little bit.
Oh, we get to hear from Marissa. That's is that right, Marissa? You're doing section 3?
That's right. I'll be talking about section 3.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Just increase my volume a little bit. Okay, so section 3, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So section 3 kind of goes over what everyone needs to do to submit their application. There needs to be a completed givingmatters.com profile, which is something that we have flagged for discussion. They will need to submit their most recent financial statements and forms 990, and those are also part of the requirements for the Giving Matters profile. They'll have to submit a letter that discloses financial support that comes from another Metro source if that applies to their organization. And there's an online application. Next slide. So the givingmatters.com profile is one thing that we do want to flag for discussion, especially regarding equity. It can be challenging for smaller organizations to get this set up and put it together. There's a lot of different components and things that are involved in setting it up. So the CARE committee did want to flag this for discussion. And specifically ask that we have someone on staff who can help new and smaller organizations in the creation of the profile. Giving Matters is a really useful task on the tool on the back end for us to be able to do the financial review. But that is something that we wanted to flag. We can go to the next slide. The financial statements and IRS forms 990. This again comes to the givingmatters.com profile. And it helps us do the review to make sure that there is that financial stability in the organization before investing in them. Go to the next slide. Then the disclosure of other Metro support. So because some nonprofits get financial support from other Metro funding sources, we just ask that they disclose this as part of the application process so that they are not double dipping, essentially. I'll go to the next slide. And so then the online grant application. So one thing that will be different this year is we are moving from web grants to submittable. We are hopeful that this will make the process easier for people applying and for us in doing the administration of the grant and going through the application process. So we'll just need to make those changes in the application, and we probably will need to, part of my role will be to offer support to the organizations as they apply through the new portal. Go to the next slide. One thing that staff wanted to bring up as a possibility using the new submittable portal is that we have the ability now to do kind of an initial letter of intent or eligibility screen before sending the full application to applicants. So essentially what we would do is we would have anyone who wanted to apply log on, fill out a really brief application, then we would screen it, Metro Arts staff would screen it, and then send them the full application. And this would allow us to make sure that no one's spending the time to write a grant when they're not actually eligible for funding. So this is just something that we wanted to raise as a possible point of discussion. It is an availability that we didn't have before that we can do now. And our suggestion would be that we have this be due about 3 weeks before the application deadline. Next slide. Okay, and so then there are the application deadline dates. These are tentative at this point. These are just kind of based on last year, generally when things are due in March. But we can discuss these if we need to, especially with uncertainty about COVID and ongoing budget issues. We'll go to the next slide. So then draft reviews. So as it stands now, applicants can request a draft review of their application prior to submitting it. and they're open to everyone. And we really encourage first-time applicants to take advantage of that. So we're planning to still include that in this year's guidelines. Go to the next slide. And then, so these are the important events. We don't have dates on this slide yet, but part of the guidelines is that we would have this list here of all the important timelines. Go to the next slide. Okay, so section 3. So again, just thinking about the different components of the application, the submittable application, whether or not to do that eligibility screen step, and then the deadlines and draft reviews and important dates. So I will pass it back over to Chair Busey and we can discuss. Oh, and you're muted. Sherry, sorry, I think you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I'm using my iPad and
It's okay.
I have to reach for my mute button. So my apologies to the commissioners and to the staff. Thank you, Marissa. Anybody have any discussions, comments, or questions? I know Marissa had a few things flagged on her review in section 3.
Yes, sure. This is Mary Elena. I just have a question. I was looking back at the CARE recommendations regarding the, the staff helping smaller or new organizations with the Given Matters profile. Is that something that we have the staff to do? Is that something that is doable for the staff?
This is Ellen from CARE. We were thinking more, even if you just had with the application, a printed list of what's required for Giving Matters and then direct them to the coach. The coaches are assigned by the name of the organization alphabetically. I think there are 2 coaches because they'll really walk them through it. But I think I've helped a few organizations prepare their profile and it's very daunting. So even if they just had a list from Metro Arts of what they have to have in before they start working on it, and then you guys direct them to the coach that they need to contact would help.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think it would be a great idea. The only thing would be if the staff doesn't have, the capacity to do that, but otherwise I think it would be a great idea, mostly for new organizations. There's a lot of things that have to happen, and so anyway, but I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And I just have a quick clarification. When we have our discussion, are we discussing whether or not we want to require that Given Matters profile, or are we discussing how we want to potentially support that particular requirement?
That is a good question. Janine or Marissa, do you have an answer to that? I mean, I guess my first meeting, I'm a little unclear on that myself.
Yeah, Janine can feel free to chime in to clarify this if I don't have a full understanding. I imagine that having the givingmatters.com profile step is going to be really important just for our process, but that we mostly wanted to discuss how to support organizations in fulfilling that requirement. But Janine, do feel free to clarify if I don't have that right.
No, that's correct, Marissa. So it allows, it helps us because information is kind of gathered there as a hub. It assists our panelists in just a place to look at information, in a centralized hub. So that's basic. It's a process, currently a benefit for us, but completely open to discussing like ways to support that. I don't have any suggestions for or staff doesn't have suggestions for an alternate to Giving Matters at this point.
Yeah, and I would add that the alternative might be that they would have to upload all of that anyway to us separately, piece by piece through Submittable. And the benefit of Giving Matters coming from, working for various size nonprofits is that once you have it set up, the next time you find a grant that you want to go for, you've got it all in order. So in that way, it can help organizations with capacity building.
Thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to know what the discussion, I completely get it from a funder's point of view of why it's important. I also just finished my Given Matters profile for my organization, and it was daunting. I had somebody help me, otherwise it would still not be done. But, you know, I do think that I think Mayor Elena made a good point around like just capacity. And Ellen, I appreciate the committee's, you know, thoughtfulness around trying to make sure that grantees have the level of support they need to be able to get that done. And when we have our discussion, I just want to flag up some of the things that you just said are really important things that we could potentially point out to grantees who might be concerned about the process or frustrated that they have to fill it out, or just, you know, overwhelmed, is that, you know, once you finish it, then this helps you when you apply for other grants, particularly, you know, in Tennessee. So like, you know, I think that there's other things we can do to help, you know, just kind of motivate and push them. I'll be concerned about the staff capacity to just provide too much support around that when I know that the Community Foundation does have that level of support. You know, I just want us to kind of be thinking through what else we can do to help them get to the support that already exists, and give them, you know, specific tools and motivation to do it.
Okay, we lost you a little bit there, Commissioner Powell, but did you finish what you needed to say, Mattia? Do you want to continue further?
No, I did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is there any other discussions or comments regarding Section 3 from Marissa? Okay, I think we can move on. Marissa, it's still your meeting.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Okay, thank you. So let's move on to Section 4, which will go over the grant review process. We can go to the next slide. All right, so can we go back one slide, please? Here's David. Thank you. There we go. Thanks. So the grant review process, same as last year. Metro Arts staff will review the applications for eligibility. Then it goes to panelists. And then the staff and commissioners entrust the panelists to review and score those applications according to a scoring guide, which we will see in just a moment. So this just goes through the process. We'll go to the next slide. So this goes over who is involved in each of the grant panels. So talks about panelists for operating support come from outside Middle Tennessee region. Core operating and project support, they come from within Metro Nashville, Davidson County, committed to the arts and the communities. This just kind of outlines both sets of panelists. Next slide. And so then this also goes over that operating support applications include the financial health assessment, and this talks about where those panelists are drawn from, CPAs. We can go to the next slide. This will all be the same as last year. And so then score sheets containing the panelists' notes are kept on file at Metro Arts, and that those are part of public record. Next slide. Okay, so the grant panelists will use a scoring guide to evaluate each application. And this is divided in three main areas: the community, the art, and organization. And the CARE committee had some recommendations for the scoring criteria that we're going to look at in the next slide in just a moment. And I think Janine's going to be going over some of that feedback. But essentially, as in past years, higher scores mean that there's a greater chance of being funded than lower scores. So we can go to the next slide. And Janine, I think this is where you wanted to take over to kind of speak about the current scoring criteria and if we want to make any changes to those.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Marissa. And we do have several comments and suggestions from CARE. And so we'll go over them. I do want to flag that it's 2:26 now. we're set to end the meeting at 3 o'clock. So we're going to go forward as much as we can. At the 2:45 mark, I might kind of ask you all to discuss whether or not you want, if we have enough time to continue on with this discussion today, or if we needed to perhaps schedule an additional working meeting, just so that we don't lose any of the richness of discussion. Okay, so but I'm going to continue on. So this is currently our some of our scoring criteria. So we have artistic and cultural merit, artistic vision, creative workforce. Again, these are very much in line with the outcomes set during the 2015 strategic planning. The CARE recommendation here is better explanation of expected standards. And so how does that pertain to lead artists, the art form itself, or overall project? So, and how are these standards determined? So really going through that, it has been a few years since we have delved into this as an agency. And so, for the CARE recommendation under cultural merit, what we have stated right now, programming demonstrates artistic excellence and cultural standards. CARE wanted to know who determines those artistic excellence, how is it applied? Is it Western standards? It seems very ambiguous and implies a Eurocentric approach to the arts. Perhaps panels need some cultural competency training before reviewing reviewing the grants and before the panel. So that's something, that we can incorporate in regards to training at administrative level, but would love, we're asking your insight on the how these standards are applied and what should be included in that possible cultural competency training. All right, next slide, please. And so again, this is kind of a definition issue for, so under leadership currently it says senior leaders have applicable experience, expertise, and are reflective of the community it serves. A little bit vague. This has been a discussion point at commission meetings of like, what does that mean? What does, how do you define who an organization serves? And so the recommendation from CARE is to be sure that the same standards are applied across the board regarding organization demographics and what all that entails. So staff board participants. So either all the organizations must be held to the standard of representing the diversity of our community, or we need across the board buy-in from staff and commission with an appropriate language expressing that BIPOC organizations may have different demographic standards as part of our goal of creating equity within the process. And then for so senior leadership, senior leaders have and are reflective of the community. So what is senior leadership? They're asking, is this considered, executive directors, program directors, board, where just additional definition, which, I think we can provide, with the committee and the commission's guidance, staff can certainly update these definitions. All right, next slide, please. Under community, so perhaps the CARE suggestion is perhaps ask for proof or make stronger suggestions that members of a particular community are involved in the planning and ideally the facilitation of a project or program that is designed to serve them. So again, so additional community engagement and influence in the process is the CARE suggestion. These are the current community scoring suggestions as they stand. And we can, I'm trying to kind of move quickly through these right now and just highlight the CARE recommendations, but we can of course return to any of these if you have questions later. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so finally, there's the financial health assessment. And so these are, just to note, so typically, so historically, we use a CPA from the community to do an independent financial health assessment for basic operating and core operating support. These are some of the things that they look at in regards to what makes a financially healthy organization. And then CARE is suggesting that in light of COVID-19, that these have to be, reassessed and a different, different standards need to be used in regards to what makes an organization financially healthy in light of what is happening. to our organizations and you know, in our world right now. Next slide, please. And so this is the proposed cultural equity criteria. This text is specifically from the Thrive guidelines that were approved. And so in the Thrive guidelines, we've now incorporated a cultural equity scoring criteria, and it's equally weighted with the other criteria. And so just to go over, so and the language also is taken from our cultural equity statement. So projects exhibit commitment to people who have been historically underrepresented in mainstream arts funding, discourse leadership, and resource allocation, including but not limited to people of color, people of all ages, differently abled people, LGBTQ people, women, and the socioeconomically disadvantaged. Project design and components move past simple representation and address the unequal nature of voice, resource allocation, and visibility that exist in the arts and cultural ecosystem. So not simply representation, not simply just like here's participants, but how are they involved in the process, in the artistic process and the production process? That's what has been used in Thrive, and something to consider for the grants. How how do we incorporate this, if we incorporate this to our FY22 grants guidelines? All right, next slide, please. Panel meetings, just a little bit of an overview of panel meetings. I won't go into too much of this, but basically panelists are selected, from the community, and invited to participate. They have some sort, they don't have a conflict of interest and have some sort of background in the arts. All right, next. All right, so the funding recommendations is something that I think we need to consider. So currently, scores and rankings for each application, so the panelist scores and rankings are used as a basis for the funding, our allocations, and they are formula based. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'll give you a more specific example of how that formula plays out. So this is a screenshot of the awards from last year's basic 1 category. And so basically you can see, there is the total score. So that top scoring organization scored 97.33. Basic 1 organizations receive typically a larger financial award, but a smaller percentage of award than the other categories such as basic 2, 3, and core in regards to operating. And so it's a formula that basically just takes that top score, and then the difference of the score that you could see impacts the formula that equates to the ultimate calculation here. So there's a 7-point difference, there's a 7-point percentage difference in the formula, and that's what that's what the award calculation is under the FY award calculation column. So that's that is what we do. We just use a formula. We don't make too many their staff doesn't make calculations. We use the panelist scores as our foundation. Their voice, staff is there to support, to provide technical assistance, but we do not make the ultimate requirements. These are out of the community. That's currently what we do. Okay, next slide, please. And then funding approval. For those of you who have been on the commission, so basically after the panel, and then staff punches in the allocations formulas, we give those proposed allocations to the Grants and Funding Committee. And then after review from the Grants and Funding Committee, that's taken to the Arts Commission for a full vote on the recommended award amounts. And then award amounts are contingent, of course, upon our budget from Metro Council, which is, so that's, always a little bit of a exciting part. There's always a little bit of uncertainty about that, especially these past couple of years, but that's basically it. And then everything, of course, is open to all meetings are open to the public. All right, next slide, please. here, just to go over the appeals, I'll just cruise over this. There is an appeals process that has been created and vetted by previous staff and the commission, and it's kind of rarely used, but it is there if someone feels that that there is a discrepancy or something unfair in the process. All right, next slide. I'll cruise through appeals. All right, and here we are at the end of section 4. It's a big one. So this one, I'll hand back to Sherry, Chair Busey, and to discuss the scoring criteria and everything else. And staff, as well as Ellen from CARE, are here.
Thank you, Janine. So let's open this to discussion. Go ahead and chime in, commissioners, if you have any questions or comments. No one? Are we going to move on to section 5? We're just going to.
I'd like to. This is Commissioner Haynes. I'd like to jump in and just kind of reinforce some of the things that I've heard. Maybe ask a couple of questions. Janine, can you talk a little bit more about those formulas? And I know you spent a little bit of time on that. I'm not sure. It wasn't really clear to me about how all that math was done. My kind of baseline conclusion is that formulas can and are inequitable, and so how those are and produce inequity. And I think that's what you're saying, but I don't know. I mean, I think we could also interpret it the other way, and so I'd like a little bit more clarity. I mean, I don't know how that formula. I don't know how to interpret that sheet, I guess, that allocation, because I don't see the underlying math that's populating it. And then a few of the other things, just observations. I don't know if this is the appropriate point or not, but I really appreciate the CARE group pointing out kind of the cultural elements, and specifically the Eurocentric kind of cultural element. And when we think about art and equity, I mean, I think that's really important, and that landed with me. And then kind of the last piece is on that financial risk and health, and that has been a tool and is a tool that is used to produce more inequitable outcomes. And so, I mean, maybe I'm just stating the obvious that everybody's already drawn these conclusions, but I feel like it's important to just be very direct and clear about those things. And so that's all I've got.
Great. So I'll try to address those one by one. So first off, with the allocations formula, this is, I definitely want your opinions on this. I wish I had, I'm so sorry I don't have the full kind of allocations sheet to show you all. The rationale behind this in regards to equity is sort of taking staff to make it to kind of taking staff out of the equation and really honoring the voices of our community members. So this isn't, we're not a private organization. We're not, a family foundation. We let the community speak about the rankings and the kind of the worthiness, for lack of a better word, of the applications and the organizations that were presented. And so kind of the best we can do right now is to come up with this formula that at least is consistent and in line with the program total score. So that's where we're at. So, the total score for the top organization, 97.33. The next ranked organization had a total score of 90.33. That's a 7-point difference, and that translated into a 7 percentage reduction in their formula. these are, this is a screenshot of just the basic ones. So the largest organizations, which typically get a smaller formula, but a larger, financial award. If I had brought up the core formula, the top scoring core formula, and I have it on my screen, but the top scoring core operating organization was Poverty in the Arts this year. And they had an average program score, a total a total score of 92.5. The next organization there was a 2-point difference. So Poverty in the Arts, the highest ranking core organization, had a higher formula of 84.5. So that's and then that equaled a much smaller actual award. Their award, was $14,619. So tiny, because their budget is tiny and their request is small, only 20% of their budget. But they got a higher percentage of what their request was. So that's where we're at. Absolutely open to hearing how we can determine those allocations. But currently, just where staff is at, trying to honor the voice of our community panel, because this is, public funds and we honor the community. So that's where we're at, but absolutely open to figuring out different ways to do that, but definitely want it to be clear and something that we can communicate to our grantees, the community members, et cetera, of like how we decide this, how much money you get.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you for that. I like the clarity on having a formula that we, having very clear standards that we stick to. I'm just kind of raising my hand to acknowledge that doesn't mean that it's equitable and produces equitable outcomes. And a lot of that kind of has to do with how the fin is magnified all the way through. And so it really puts a lot of pressure, right, on that. So just that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
This is Mary Elena. I have kind of a question. Did I see throughout the presentation of this section, the CARE team, I'm not sure if I understood this right. Are they proposing or they're suggesting that we need to have like different criteria for the panelists to score? Or
yeah, at this point, I'll invite Ellen to kind of provide comment on that.
No, what we're saying is either this is based on a conversation I heard on the recording of the meeting on grants allocation, where like the children's theater was called too white, which I disagree with that. But at any rate, either we need across the board standards. Every organization has to reflect the diversity of the community, which means even BIPOC organizations would have to reflect the diversity of the community and not just their own community. Or if we're saying that because of, the challenges of providing equity or gaining equity, that BIPOC organizations do not have to reflect the diversity of Nashville and can just reflect their own population that they serve and represent. So to me, it needs to be across the board so that everyone's supposed to reflect the diversity of the community. Or if we're saying that's not necessary, then we have language that explains why there might be different standards as a way to try to get more equity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was just wondering if, based on that, if there's a way to, and again, maybe this is a discussion for some other time, because I know we're short on time, but, should we be able to provide, to the panelists and, use this criteria when you're thinking about your scores? And I know that we already do that, but be more specific when it comes to those issues,
Thank you, Mary Elena. Anyone else have any more comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Mattia. I just want to comment on a couple of things that I've heard so far. Ellen, I understand what you're saying and what the CARES Committee is asking, and I agree that we should make sure that we're clear and have specific, tangible things that help understand for our panelists as they understand the criteria and what we're trying to reflect when we have applications. So I don't know if this is if this is something that the staff can come back with some specific language around that we can, look at or how that works. I don't think we're going to be able to have time to think through that today. But secondly, I just for the formula, I know Clay, you had some concerns about it. And I've been on the grants committee now for a little while and have been, chaired it last time. I do think the formula does basically what Janine said. It takes an opportunity for us to kind of take what the panelists has, how they have ranked the organizations, and then, have a way to apply that ranking so that so everybody gets funding based on that reflection of that. And there are a lot of things that comes out in those panelist discussions. And then there's also of course, the financial assessment. And, I just want to say this because I feel like we didn't really get to have a chance to have a conversation about it in our last discussion. I think we did talk a lot about equity and diversity when we talked about our last allocation funding. And I know that this is a big part of the work that we're doing now, but it's not the only requirement that our panelists look at. And there were specifically some of the things the challenges that we're going to continue to face, right? And I think this is why it's important that we have these conversations and our guidelines are clear. We're going to have hopefully more organizations now. Who knows now that we're in this pandemic, and I know the art community is really struggling. But this last grant cycle, we had more organizations that qualified for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Janine, but we had more organizations that qualified for for the basic categories than we have had in the past. Some of the organizations that were some of the organizations that were that had been, probably that had been part of the core support or a project support. They had been in a process where they were now at least eligible for basic support. So it seemed like, I think a lot of conversation was around people's equity and diversity scores, but math was just actually different. So, we had more organizations that were qualified for basic funding, but we haven't really increased art funding across the city since the last time that we went through the adjudication process. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not been a massive amount of, additional funds allocated to the Arts Commission, but we had more people applying for the funding. So when you have more people applying and the same amount of resources or similar resources, that does mean that there's going to be people that get less because there's more people, taken from the same pot. And, unless something changes in the city when it comes to our financial stability, as well as, our commitment to, allocating more money to arts, we're going to probably continue to have to make tough decisions if more people understand that the work that we're trying to do, and they're starting applying for it, which we want. We want people to be part of this work. We want people to, you want the community to have access to this funding. So I do think clarifying some of these, having some really tangible ways to clarify the language that we hope to, that we're trying to express around equity and diversity, around cultural, some of our expectations around arts excellence. All of those things are going to be really important because, as more and more people apply, and unless again we get some in more funding, we're probably going to have to continue to make tough decisions. And so, the more that we have this clarified, the better we'll be able to. I think our panelists will be able to take, what we're trying to fund and take these directions and really apply those to each application, at a more consistent rate. And then we as commissioners will have a better understanding of what to look for when we're trying to approve these grants.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Anyone else want to comment on what we just heard or any new discussions?
Chairman Busey, this is Jim Schmidt. And I would just echo what Mattia and Marilena have both said. I think we need a better understanding for both the panelists who are scoring these, as well as on the front end to the actual organizations around the cultural equity expectations. And I think people need to think a little bit about that when they're, filling out their grant applications as well. Because, I mean, while there may be examples where it wasn't the sole thing that impacted somebody's scoring and how much grant they got last year, I know of one organization where the main factor that was pointed to was the cultural equity of the organization. And I don't know if the panelists just didn't have a very good understanding or didn't have some clear information from the applicant, but it was a really substantial hit to that organization. And I still am a little unclear as to what the driver of that was, other than what I was told. So I think we need good, solid parameters laid out for both sides of this, both on the front end and on the back end, so we don't see situations like that again. So,
yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. Yeah, I think it's the nature of our organization that, it's not perfect, and there are going to be some organizations that get slighted and some will not. But I think if we try to keep our eye on how these panelists get adjudicated, and also to make the criterion a little more clearer and clarified a little more. But I think we do have to have a room for not error, but there has to be a little bit of, again, the wiggle room, because sometimes it's hard. It's really difficult. Big organizations want a lot of money, and smaller organizations deserve a little bit of money. And if they don't meet our criterions in one direction or another, it really does affect the money that we give to them. So I think we're all trying to say we need to be a little more specific with the criterion and with the formula to be as fair and as equitable as possible. So I'll stop talking. Is there anybody else who wants to add to the discussion on this, or should we move on?
This is Grace. I will jump in as sort of the admin that's sort of stopping the fun of all this discussion.
Yeah.
We are reaching 6 minutes left in our scheduled time. So I didn't know if the committee wanted to discuss next steps, how you'd like to proceed, because it does sound like there's a lot of rich conversations still to be had. And I know that Jeanine and Marissa have another section to present to y'all as well. So we don't want to stifle the discussion, but we also want to be respectful of your time.
Right. As the chair of this meeting, am I allowed to say, could we go over 15, maybe 20 minutes and get this business done? And do we think we can, and staff, do you think we can get this done in 15 or 20 minutes? If we can all stay.
I think 20 minutes for discussion would be fine. We could at least touch on everything and begin a discussion, but I'm not sure what comments are out there that might take longer. So it depends on how much the committee members would like to add to the full discussion.
Okay, Grace, do you know if there's a precedent? Should we just shut the meeting down at 3 and try to reconvene to finish this?
So I believe y'all can do whatever you decide as a committee. My only concern would be, Philip, I know you have a schedule to hold to. Would that mess up your day in any way, or is there a way you could pass the meeting over to me?
I'm here till 5 p.m. and how that gets spent doesn't really matter to me. I can stay an extra 15, 20 minutes, whatever y'all need.
Thank you. You are a hero. So the committee, I believe it would be up to you about what y'all would want to do.
Would you like me to take a quick roll call and see if everybody wants to stay 20 minutes extra today? I think I'll go ahead and do that. So let me let me take a quick roll call. Just say a yay or nay if you want to stay 20 minutes extra. Or if you can, Mary Ann, Commissioner Byrd.
Commissioner Byrd is able to stay an extra 20 to 30 minutes.
Commissioner Daniel. Commissioner Daniel.
Hi, this is Jackie Daniel. It's going to be difficult for me. Am I required for quorum?
Well, let's find out who could stay and who can't, and then we'll figure that out.
I will throw in that technically committees don't actually require quorum. It's just the commission. So.
Oh, okay.
But it wouldn't be a situation where it would sort of be like, no, Jackie, you must stay or it's all over. Because we certainly understand that you have a very busy schedule.
Okay, yeah, I've got 3 people here kind of looking to me for direction now, and it would be better if I didn't, but I would love for you all to proceed without me.
Daniel, that's fine.
Okay.
Commissioner Dow, how do you feel about it?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank goodness. So I'm sorry to say I can't stay because I have a 3 o'clock that I have to get to. But I would love to see this get done. So don't worry about me.
Thank you, Commissioner Dow. Commissioner Haynes, what's your feelings?
I can stick around.
Commissioner Powell?
I can stick around.
Commissioner Ramos?
I can stay.
Lovely. And Commissioner Schmidt, I know I don't have to ask, but do you want to stay or do you want to go?
I'll stay as long as I can.
All right, lovely. Well, I mean, we only have a couple of people that bowed out. I think let's try to finish the business in 20 minutes. And I hope I'm not overstepping my authority as chair, but I think we all want to see it done. So I'm going to ask that we move on to section 5.
Great, and this actually should be a pretty quick section. There's just a few highlighted sections to talk about, so then we can jump into that rich discussion about and a review. Marissa will provide the review, and then we'll go into the discussion with the committee members. So next slide, please. And so here is, this is part of the, this is an administrative recommendation from CARE, but there is that recommendation that organizations should be given a specific date when they can receive the funding. This has not been, there are issues in regards to our messaging from Metro Finance. It's not just up to Metro Arts, unfortunately. We are kind of at the mercy of other circumstances, but there was a request that organizations know for certain. So staff doesn't have a recommendation about how to resolve this, especially in, given this year's challenges and the messaging that we were provided, from Metro Finance and the mayor's office, and just, with the possible referendum and our possible budget cuts. So this was pretty challenging, but that is just something to highlight and flag. All right, next slide, please. Record keeping and reporting. And so Marissa, having her on board has just been great, and she has great ideas about how to communicate and add to some, additional communication about what is required for record keeping and reporting. Not too much of a discussion here, but definitely lots of comments and additional improvements that we're looking to propose and include in the guidelines. And Marissa can, during the discussion, if you have questions about that, Marissa can provide those details. Next slide, please. Okay, some more record keeping. I think we can cruise past this, but we will definitely touch on Marissa's amazing expertise about that. Logo and credit policy is pretty standard, nothing really to discuss there. And maintaining good standing, same. We just require that folks adhere to the guidelines and what they stated in their application and provide the things as requested. And then if not, at the next funding and review cycle, they might receive a point decrease in their score if they do not maintain good standing. We have not had to apply this yet, but we do have that as a possibility and a policy. Next slide, please. All right, more of the maintaining good standing, just the details of it. All right, next slide, keep going. We just really go into maintaining good standing. So we want you to maintain good standing. Monitoring is fine. We monitor 10% of all of the awardees. All right, next slide. And that is basically it. So I will hand it back to Chair Busey for the discussion, and then Marissa can review.
Thank you, Janine. Let's open it up for discussion. Any comments or questions, commissioners? I can't see if a hand is raised on my screen. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Okay. This is Mary Elena. I just there's maybe 2 points that that really caught my attention, or 3 points. The matching funds, I think, is really something that I would personally like to have discussed further. Again, I'm not sure if today is the day that we do that, but I think given the circumstances, I personally think I would consider maybe removing that, and if not all categories, at least the core category of the projects categories, to make it a little bit easier for those smaller organizations to be able, or newer organizations to be able to seek grants from us. I think that I'm very concerned about the possibility of losing or not funding the project category, because, as I mentioned before, typically those projects reach out to a lot of underserved populations and people of color, so that it's a little bit of a concern to me. And again, open to discussion, but I just wanted to voice my opinion on that. And definitely discuss a little bit further what are we going to do when it comes to panelists, and are we going to be more clear on our goals, what is that they need to look at, and the same with the organizations before they even fill out that application, what exactly is that we need to know, or the panelists will be looking for when they, read those applications. So that's kind of what I would like to discuss, but I'm not sure, again, if today is the day for that.
Thank you, Mary Elena. You kind of jumped the gun, but I'm glad you did, because we are pressed for time. But I just want to make sure, was there any discussions in the Section 5 review? If there's, excuse me, did anybody want to say anything about just the Section 5 review? And then we can go back and review everything and address exactly what topics like what Mary Elena just brought up. Were there any discussions about Section 5?
Sorry about that.
No. I'm glad you did. I'm so glad you did, because we do all want to move on. And I think Section 5, I think we pretty much are in consensus that there's not a whole lot of controversial issues in Section 5. So I am happy to lead a discussion on the next steps, which is an overall review. And I think, Grace, there you go. There's a slide that we all want to see. So I'm happy to take questions and discussions. And we need to keep in mind what Mary Elena just said. She had 3 points regarding the matching funds, regarding core, and regarding the panelist rating system. Was that correct, Mary Elena?
Yeah, the project category.
Yeah.
Project
And Marissa has been taking notes that she can share that review the major themes. Phil, you'll just have to make Marissa, I think, I'm not sure, give her that permission.
Yeah, I can also send the Google document link to whoever's sharing the presentation right now, whatever way.
If you, maybe, Phil, do you have any insight on how we can go ahead and do that?
It looks like Marissa's the presenter.
Yeah, so I just made Marissa the presenter.
Okay, great. Let's do that.
Phil's on it. He is just making stuff happen.
Okay, let's see.
You guys have been easy.
Glad to hear it.
All right, let me find this and share it. Okay, so what I have here on the left column, this A column, was those overall concepts that we started with at the beginning of the presentation. The notes I've been taking by section are here in the C column. Which there's a way I could.
I would like, since Mary Lana brought up the matching funds, I think that that's a big item for us to discuss. Thinking, looking at all of the items that we've got on this list, and I just want to voice my opinion that I agree that we should consider getting rid of matching funds, or if we decide that it's important that there are some matching funds for some of our that we would extend those only to larger grants as opposed to some of the smaller grants. I mean, I'm on the Hill and Trust Board. We do not require matching funds. I know that has been some practice with some funders, and it's standard practice with some, but it's also not standard practice with others. And giving the robustness of our particular application, I think so. The matching funds has two things. One is Janine mentioned there's skin in the game. If there's some skin in the game for an organization if they have matching funds, and then there is a nonprofit person who's been doing grants and has to do grants all the time, and some of them have matching fund requirements. You can use like that matching fund requirement as an opportunity to fundraise, but to me that's probably the only upside to it, and it's not even a big upside. I think we understand. We're doing a financial analysis of the organization, and this shows whether or not they're viable. That's part of the process. So I just don't know that the matching funds is necessary. So I am for getting rid of it completely. But if people feel like it's important that we keep it on some of the categories, I'm willing to have a conversation about that as well. But I definitely think I am in favor of letting that go.
This is Ellen from CARE. Can I chime in here? Some grants, like South Arts has grants where you only have to match a quarter of it and not dollar for dollar. But I can tell you one small Mexican organization who got a small project grant from Tennessee Arts Commission this year, and they had to do their project virtually, so they were unable to collect any money for it, and they had absolutely no way to match the grant. So their grant match requirement for this current year was excused. And so that may be something that Metro Arts has to look at for this year as well, for some of the smaller organizations and projects that, because they didn't have them where they thought they were going to and couldn't collect, as much admission fee or something, it may be something to consider even for this year for some organizations, if possible.
And then I do want to just jump in with a little bit of additional information from our finance director, Ian Myers, who reminded me that some of the rationale behind, for matching requirements is to show that they would have enough operating funds till we issue the grant. So again, that they're financially viable enough, but maybe could be addressed in a deeper financial analysis. So again, just wanted to add that information that I got from Ian.
Thank you, Janine.
This is Mary.
Anybody else want to talk?
Yes, please.
Okay.
This is Mary Ann Bird. I can see it from both points of view. I would suggest that maybe there ought to be a limit as to how often or how many times an organization can get a grant with non-matching or some sort of reciprocal fundraising. You wouldn't want someone to get a certain amount every year just because they have the same project every year without kind of earning it somehow or getting some skin in the game. But unless it's just a one-year thing, I would suggest that there be a limit on how frequently or how many times overall you could get a grant that does not require matching or percentage fundraising.
Thank you, Commissioner Bird. That may be a question for Ian Myers to answer as well. Does anybody have any comments about what Mary Ann just said? Any feelings on one way or the other?
This is Fatia. I completely understand the rationale behind that. I just wonder how hard it would be for us to track it, particularly for the not for us, but for the commissioner, the staff to track it, and what that require. But that'd be more trouble for them to track it, and then
Yeah,
be able to have a good year.
Yeah, Mattia, I tend to agree with you. This is Chairwoman Busey. I think that I don't know. Is it possible to just say get rid of the matching funds during this time of the COVID? I mean, we can always readdress it and take another look at it in next year or 2 years from now. But it seems like there's a little more desperation in the air, and the matching funds seems to be a huge onus on arts communities. That's my opinion.
Just to clarify, Janine, these guidelines are updated every year. So, say for instance, we decided not to have the matching funds this year because of COVID or the challenges for COVID. That would be reviewed automatically next year, right?
Correct.
Or could be. Doesn't have to be.
Correct.
Could be.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussions as we move down these sections and try to get a motion to approve with changes or not?
I'll just chime in quickly. I'd be in favor of completely removing the matching grants, specifically for tier 3 for the smallest grant categories. And the philosophical underpinning for that is that I believe that we at Metro need to be taking more risk to help seed the community and to grow that. And in requiring a matching grant, I think that I see all this as a function of risk. So just that.
Thank you, Commissioner Haynes. Are there any other items that really people feel strongly about that we can address right now? Or we can go back to matching funds if you'd like. Any other comments or questions?
Or could you scroll down a little bit more, so I can see what other the big things were? I can't remember. Matching funds was one that signed up, but that stood out, but I can't remember the other big thing.
Mary Elena had a couple of points that she wanted to.
Scoring criteria, I would put on that big category list.
Yeah, one of those was the scoring criteria that we discussed. Do we need to be more clear on what are the expectations from both the panelists and the organizations before they even submit their applications of what exactly is expected when it comes to that.
Janine, remind me, I know that with the Thrive grants, we did approve a rubric, right, for particularly some of the equity and diversity, requirements. Did we not?
Yes, and so that's something staff has discussed. Definitely creating that. We do have a scoring. We do have a scoring guide that we do give to our grantees, but it doesn't specifically break out, like examples. And I think we could do a better job. We could revisit what those the scoring guideline is. If we do include, the equity criteria, being very specific about that. And so that's something that, you as a commission or a committee and a commission can just give to staff to do, and then we can present that out, to you again. We do have a little bit, we don't necessarily have to include that within the guidelines. It is a separate document currently. And so we can present that to you separately, just the scoring criteria, that part of the panel education. And, just to note, that document isn't reviewed annually, and so perhaps it should be. I'm open to that. I think it would be a healthy thing for folks to have eyes on it, but it is yeah. But we can do that if you all decide on just some guiding principles within the guidelines. We can get a very specific and detailed scoring criteria guide for panelists that we can present for grants and funding committee review.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Commissioner Powell.
So I would say yes. I think if that's a next step that we would like, I mean, personally, I think if we could have a scoring, a rubric that, includes some of those topics that the Chairs Committee brought out and has some tangible criteria around art excellence, as well as equity and diversity, and even defining, what, talking about, what that looks like in an organization. And in addition to that, though, I do think it's important that that is available in enough time for, and I don't know if this is possible, but it should be shared or available enough time for organizations to understand what they're going to be judged on or what their criteria is going to be judged on for the grant, so that they can have that as well. That's my own personal opinion. I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna be quiet.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Any other questions or discussions?
I just want to say that I completely agree with Commissioner Powell on this. I think that is a great idea. And Janine, it's not too much. I think this is something that could also be reviewed every year. Everything is changing so much, and the arts community is changing so much. We are changing so much as a commission that I think it's good to always, review that on a yearly basis and make sure that we're not leaving anybody out.
Absolutely. This can be part of the annual review. Yeah, I think that's a healthy, I think that's a healthy choice, move on.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Any more comments or questions, or do you think I can move on to approve the proposed changes, or do we need to discuss a few more of these changes? What is your feeling on this, staff?
So, I mean, you have a couple options, I think. I think you can meet again as a working committee, a working group, and continue to discuss the themes and the proposed revisions that were brought up today, and then meet again, then bring that document to the full commission. We do have a commission meeting next week. So what we can also do is, Sherry, we can work with you and present something, maybe a summary of, discussed so far, topics, and then bring that to the commission next week and then continue. So there's a couple different things that you could do. Right. Of course, staff can work on, can incorporate what we have, what has been presented so far, and have that as a draft, 2.0 to present to you and the commission. So, we can update we can update everything with the information and the preferences that you all have made today, made clear today, and then continue the discussion at commission if you feel comfortable with that. Or you could keep it closed to the committee until you are ready to make a full decision. So I think those are the options.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all clear that we're not really ready to make a motion to approve what's before us, what's been presented today, that there are some significant changes that need to be made. If staff, and I think I might be talking to Marissa, can share your notes with us, with the people that are here today via email, and we can look them over and we can all talk about changes, give them to you. You can make yet another outline, and then we can propose to approve the motion at the next commission meeting. How does that sound to commissioners?
Just one big point of reference that we didn't discuss, and I don't know, and this might actually be a discussion for the larger commission on whether or not we actually move all of our funding in 2020 and next year to operating support and not do projects. We haven't discussed that, and I definitely think that is something that is going to require some thought and heavy discussion.
Right.
So I just want to flag that. Whatever you guys think to do about it, I just want to flag it.
Yeah, I
One point to that, Chairman Busey, this is Jim. We should also keep in mind the council has obviously directed significant care funds to go to the arts organizations across the city, $2 million, which is an amazing amount of money that will hopefully, alleviate some of that operation. I don't think it by any means, satisfies the problem, but as we talk about that, everyone should keep in mind the other funding streams that have been available for these nonprofits across the city too.
Yeah, thank you. We can't run around with bags of money and throw them at people, but it is nice that we have some more money. It truly is. So I think we're going to table this motion. And Grace, what do I do? Do we just close the meeting and discuss this again next Thursday and try to get the motion passed on next Thursday's meeting?
Yes, but I will also defer to Janine and Marissa too if you have any input. Technically, though, yes, that is how you would proceed.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I'm doing this right.
Chairwoman Busey, just to chime in quickly, it feels to me that we should have a consensus at our level before we pass it along to the full commission. And my concern is because this is such a involved issue and one of such great importance to our entire commission, that I'd like to see our group have some really specific meaty recommendations, and for us to do the committee work that is required, so that by the time that it gets to the commission, that we have some really strong kind of underpinning for what we're suggesting. And so just for me, I feel like this is committing 2.5 hours today is a great start, but I'd like to do another 2.5 hours to get further through this before it goes to the full commission. And I hesitate to say that because when it comes to equity, I never want to be advocating for slowing down, which is the net effect right now of what I'm saying. So I'm acknowledging that, but I want a real coherent, very structured set of recommendations coming out of this committee is my thought.
And I will just chime in from the staff end that we do have the time for discussion. If we wanted to meet again as a committee to discuss this, we can bring this to the commission in December or even January, and actually would still be fine with our timeline for releasing guidelines to grant to applicants.
Oh, well, that gives us some time then.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Haynes that we're not ready to the full commission, but I think we have a little discussion. Okay,
I'm having some huge audio problems. Does anybody else have a lot of extracurricular noise in the background? Mary Elena, can you please repeat what you said, just, I guess, for my sake? I'm sorry to make you do that.
It's okay, totally fine. No, that I said that I agree with Commissioner Haynes that we do need to discuss this a little bit more amongst us and this committee before we present to the full commission.
I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad that staff has time. And we don't really need to do this before our next Thursday's commission meeting, I understand. So do you want to meet, I don't know, the end of this, maybe in a few weeks or the beginning of December? I propose that we try to meet maybe that first week in December after the Thanksgiving holiday.
Works for me, Sherry. And you've done an excellent job, by the way.
This was such a whopper of a meeting for my first one. I really dove in, didn't I? I had to.
You did great.
Thank you very much.
Agree.
So I think let's look at the first week in December, and maybe Janine or Marissa can throw some dates at us. A good time for the staff, and let's set aside a couple more hours. I think it needs it. We have so much to discuss still.
You know, we can, if there's some specific dates or dates that do not work in that first week, you all can give those now. If not, Grace can send another doodle poll and we can figure it out that way.
Yeah, I also have Janine, Marissa, and I's schedules too, if you would like to talk about that. Janine, are you generally out from 2 to 3?
Nope, that's a change now. I can change that since I have moved. So we can do, this is a perfect time.
Okay, great. I mean, you guys got us at a good time. We're fairly open. I know mornings before 10 a.m. is out. So does anybody on the committee have?
Only day that first week of December would be the 1st. I cannot do the 1st, but the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th is fine. Or you can say the full only.
And I'm this is Chairwoman Busey. I'm available towards the end of the week, that first part. So the 1st or the 2nd, probably not good for me, but anything beyond the 3rd is fine.
This is Mary Ann Bird. Only day that week that is committed for me is the 2nd, which is Wednesday. Other than that, right now I'm open. Can't promise it'll stay that way.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to chime in with their schedule? Or do you want Grace to do a doodle for us?
So is the 3rd, it seems, so 3rd is a Thursday, so that would be kind of similar to meeting today, from 1 to 30, just to be honest about the amount of time this potentially will take to discuss, or maybe 1 to 3, since we don't have to go over the, the full guidelines. It'll just be the discussion points. But would that work for everybody?
That worked for me. Thursday, free. If we have the list of decisions we actually use, that would be quite helpful.
Yes, I think that maybe myself and Janine and Marissa, the 3 of us can talk via email or do another Zoom, and we can outline what needs to be discussed and what we want to accomplish in that next meeting to sort of streamline, the agenda for that day. Does that sound like something the 3 of us can do?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful. And I will do my best to go ahead and get calendar invitations and schedules out to y'all so we snap you up before anything else does.
Yeah, and let's hope that Jackie and Bonnie can be on board with that December 3rd. And if not, we'll just keep working on it until we all can come to a date that we can all mutually agree upon. So if it's okay with everyone, I think I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Do I have any objections to that?
No, and thank you for a good meeting.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a good meeting. Thank you for being patient, and thank you for all of your kind words. And I really can't wait to continue this and to get stuff done, because like Commissioner Haynes says, this is important stuff and we want to get it right. So until we hear from everybody, we'll hopefully see one another on December 3rd or beyond.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you so much.
Thank you all so much.